Hello and welcome to the Digital Studio at Cape Town Conversation 2024. Today we are discussing the great transition, probably a transition like no other, which is navigating the shift towards renewables. I am Shoma Bhaumik, fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and I have with me two brilliant experts. Here we have Jordan McLean, who's researcher at the South African Institute of International Affairs. We also have with us Igor Makarov, who is head at the School of World Economy at the Higher School of Economics in Russia. Discussing about the great transition and navigating the shift towards renewables, I honestly feel that we already have millionaires, we already have billionaires. I think the first trillionaires and multi-trillionaires will be will be the person who solves the climate crisis, vis-a-vis basically making the shift towards renewables more applicable, more effective. Now, jumping straight to the point on this transition towards renewables, we all know it's quite a bumpy road. It has its challenges as well as its opportunities. And most importantly, the journey towards this renewable is quite disproportionate, not only in terms of the base infrastructure, how you use that infrastructure to navigate the shift towards renewables, but also this journey poses a lot of social as well as economic challenges, which are quite different and quite disproportionate between the global south countries and the global north countries on one hand. The impacts of it are also different across countries in different geographies, different kind of social settings. So I would like to come to you first, Jordan. Like, what is your opinion on how is it different? How this transition or this journey towards this transition is different in terms of the base as well as the socio-economic impacts between different countries?
I think I'll start actually by laying out one similarity, and that's the fact that transitions you can't undertake a transition really in a silo. It's an economy-wide, very volatile change, and these spillover impacts are also very difficult for governments to manage if they are not really in touch with the perspectives of the people whose lives will be most affected. And this is speaking directly from South Africa's experience, where our Just Transition Energy Partnership is actually negotiated without the involvement and prior consent of the South African people. However, the government has really put plans and measures in place to try and integrate those perspectives as far as possible, to ensure that the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are tied up and really linked deeply to the coal value sector and really geographically focused in a specific region of northern South Africa are really taken into account, and that there are programs put in place to actually protect people's livelihoods in that sense. I mean, the transition as well, the impact on the economy go far beyond how attractive our country is in terms of an investment destination. It also really links up with how respectable we can be on international platforms, where we really need to advocate for accelerating the transition along nationally determined lines, which is also another important aspect, but also to make sure that our commitment to the broader Paris Agreement is really communicated through what we do on the ground and how we implement this transition. So I think this approach that South Africa has to take is really it comes out of our position in the global space. So global South economies are really still developing. They are continuing to look for growth opportunities, and it's not always easy to balance that against resources that you already have within your country that other actors are telling you shouldn't be using. So this is a constant balance that developing countries really have to take into account. It's a difficult journey, as you say. It really is a journey. You have to really make sure that your just transition policies are adaptable and are continuously changing with respect to how the global environment environment is advancing. I mean, we've just come out of COP29 where the Just Transition Work Program really faced immense challenges trying to get some kind of text that everyone could agree to over the line, and a text that needed to be adequately ambitious, to guide just transition policies as we go forward. I think it's really an achievement of the Brazilian G20 presidency that they were able to come out with, voluntary principles on a just transition that tried to take global South perspectives and, the differences these economies face into account in terms of how countries should be approaching just transitions. And I really do expect South Africa to take this conversation forward even more as we take over the just transition the G20 in less than a week. It's already been identified as one of our priorities. So it's still an interesting space, but it's really a space where there's a lot of change, not only in the transition itself, but how the narrative around the transition is really advancing.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. You spoke about COP29. It's been so recent. We know that the deficit for the SDGs and also for climate action runs into trillions, whereas the commitment is only 300 million. The Indian representation at the COP29 has categorically rejected the outcome of it. But yes, moving on to you, Igor, what is your view of this transition, and how do you see this is a little bit skewed towards or in favor of the global North countries, global South countries, or different kind of countries? Like your holistic opinion about this transition?
I think that this division between global North and global South, it is still like oversimplification, which is of course necessary and useful, but of course the diversity of countries is huge even within these groups. For example, my country, Russia, is a country which is dependent on exports of fossil fuels. And of course, green transition for countries like that is a challenge for not just for some specific groups of population or some specific regions, though it also exists, but it is a challenge for the whole economic model. This economic model, we may argue whether it is efficient or non-efficient, whether it is good or bad, but it was the base for the development of the country for the last 50 years. And of course, green transition in such conditions, it is perceived like a challenge. And there are, moreover, different interest groups, which only some of them and smaller part of them are in favor of green transitions, and others say that coal will be consumed forever, and we may export coal forever. And if we can't do it, what we will do with 2 million people who live in coal-dependent regions. So the discussions like that are very widespread, and so of course they are not the factor which accelerates green transition in Russia. And the share of renewables in Russia right now, I mean wind and solar, it is less than 1% in energy mix. Partly it is because of this political landscape, partly it is because of some objective obstacles like very high cost of capital. Like we have the interest rate now in Russia 23%. So it is very, very high cost of capital, and renewables with such cost of capital, they can't work well. On the other hand, we have very severe climate, and renewables are very good for electricity production, but not so good yet, at least for heat production, which is crucial for the Russian context. We have huge distances. So we have regions which may provide with solar energy the whole Russia and half of Eurasia, but nobody lives there in these regions, and they are very far from the major centers of consumption. So, and with the Russian distances, it is very challenging to deliver this electricity. So there are various challenges, and that's why it doesn't mean that Russia won't develop these technologies. It will, but not in the first rows, of course. And at the same time, Russia develops develops nuclear energy, in which it is very strong. Russia develops hydro electricity, in which it has huge potential. And Russia also has its own position on this concept of just energy transition. It was in Kazan Declaration of BRICS. And Russia looks as a major principle within this concept, the principle of technological neutrality. So all the means to reduce emissions are good. So nuclear energy is good, hydro energy is good if it allows to reduce emissions. They are not worse than wind and solar, for example. Absorption of CO2 by natural sinks, by forests, for example, is also okay because it also plays the same role. So Russia looks at this position on this issue like that, and it is a different point of view rather than from the for example, European country, and it is also different from the South African perspective. But it is a specifics of the country.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. But the key takeaway that I take from what you said is that we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to this journey. It is indeed a journey, and it's really you're right. We can't really simplify this journey by the development status of the country, be it global north, global south. It's more about the geographies, the people, the extremities that we have. So it's quite a difficult journey, which is difficult to categorize into silos or into groupings. Now, coming to my next question is that, in contemporary times, we have seen how energy markets are so severely disrupted by geoeconomic impacts, geopolitical impacts. Now, given this what we are seeing in the global markets, how do you think there could be market mechanisms, not only market mechanisms, but also how could be a holistic global approach in terms of collaborations, partnerships, multilaterals, as well as global market mechanism that kind of catalyzes this process moving toward the shift of renewables. While, because at the end of the day, climate change and the impact of climate change is a global common. It's something that all of us have to face. I mean, nobody is saved from the wrath of it. But how do you think that we can move towards this journey more smoothly? Your views, Jordan?
I think part of what is really critical for advancing the just transition, on a global scale, and particularly for the global south, is really de-risking a lot of how investment is actually carried out. Because I think, some of the points that Igor has already mentioned, the cost of capital, really the costs to set up infrastructure that can support, aspects of the transition. I mean, I think of the just energy transition for South Africa. We've identified electric vehicles as, one of our core focus areas or priority areas. But South Africa as a country really struggles with our electricity grid. It's very difficult to keep the lights on. We've done it now for over 200 days, and that's something that we celebrate as a country, which kind of shows you how difficult the situation really is. And so I think that's one critical aspect. But even more than that, I think we really have to rethink how we incentivize, approaches to the just transition. And I think initiatives like what Brazil has just set up, one of the outcomes of the Sustainable Finance Working Group is the Brazilian Ecological Transformation sort of investment platform, which really shows, as a country, these are our objectives, these are the projects that we would like to finance, and we invite, financing partners to join us on this journey. And I think what that does is it really makes sure that your transition, how your transition plays out, is nationally owned and nationally defined. And sometimes that's an aspect that can be missing in transitions. And I think because it's such a global conversation, policymakers really have to fight to keep their national development, priorities at the center, and it is easy to lose that. It is also easy to come to negotiations and see other states, Western states have a really strong idea what a just transition is, and in the global south, however you conceptualize the global south, because it is still hotly contested, defining, there isn't one singular definition of a just transition. So it's really difficult then to make sure that your just transition concept is moving with the times and moving as well with how the market is moving and what is attractive to the market. I'm not an economist, but I know that undertaking a just transition is an expensive endeavor. At the end of the day, it comes down to finance. We've seen from COP29 that finance is a really difficult conversation to have. But I think it's a wrong perception to think that one side of the table has the finance and one side of the table doesn't. We have these innovations from the South, the New Development Bank, the Asian Investment Bank. These are critical aspects or critical parts of how the transition will play out in terms of attracting that finance.
Very interesting. Okay, now Igor, coming to you, we know you're an economist. So, if we could you explain to us if we can move towards better market mechanisms that could induce or catalyze this process towards, which makes this journey towards renewables a little bit more convenient in the future?
Yeah, there is a huge asymmetry between, and in this case, we may say that it is between global north and global south, because in the global north, there is finance and green finance available for financing different carbon reduction projects, but there are no cheap carbon reduction projects anymore. Yeah, because it costs how much to reduce a ton of CO2 in Europe, like 70 euro or something like that, right? But in the global south, there are a lot of cheap carbon reduction projects. And by the way, Russia is also part of global south, ironically, in this aspect. There are a lot of opportunities to reduce emissions, but there are no finance available for this project. So the major idea should be to link available green capital, which is located primarily on the global north, with cheap projects to reduce emissions in the global south. Yeah. The very natural way to do it is to launch carbon markets. Yeah, and they should be international in this case. And in this case, emissions would be reduced where it is cheaper to reduce emissions. So for the same money, we may reduce more emissions and to accelerate green transitions even more. The problem is that carbon markets, in the manner how they develop right now, they develop nationally. Yes, there are mechanisms of Article 6 of Paris Agreement, but we all understand that it is very, very narrow stream. And yes, it is probably, it may be suggested as a good step forward and as a first step in the development of global carbon markets, but still it is very, very small stream right now. So to develop global carbon markets, to develop these streams of finance from developed countries to developing countries through the mechanism of carbon markets, I think it is one of the priorities of the global coordination, which unfortunately is lacking. Yeah. Climate finance, which is discussed very widely, yes, it is also a very important issue, but market mechanisms, they are still more efficient anyway. And one more issue, one very important issue, is that we still absolutely lack the dialogue between countries which are exporting of fossil fuels and the countries which are importing them. Yes. So all the dialogue is that these guys, they come and say, let's phase out of fossil fuels. It does not work like that.
It's not going anywhere.
It is not only the supply side. There is a demand side. There is a price. Yeah, and so let's talk. Let's coordinate. Let's create some roadmaps how to phase out of fossil fuels. It will take a lot of time and it would be painful for everyone. But without this coordination, nothing will work.
Most of the times, we lack the coordination about the demand side or the supply side and try to put things in place which kind of mitigates one, but that way we never reach the equilibrium. Hopefully we'll have a better future. However, in the interest of time, we'll quickly go to the last question and we want your opinion, like quick opinions, like 30 seconds each, is that on the fact that let's talk about the future. We have often spoken about what government should do, what public and private sector should do. So, given your background in this field, how do you think Jordan will be the most effective way? Which is the institution, or is it a group of institutions, or is it multilateral forums like, say, BRICS or the G20? What could be a systematic way you think will be the most effective way forward in our transition towards renewables?
I think one of the growing pains, now that we're talking about the pain of the transition for South Africa, was really, trying to reinvigorate social dialogue. So we have the Presidential Climate Commission, which is just at the national level, which is bringing different actors together, which I think is so critical. On the global scale, I still do believe in the UNFCCC's process. That is where the conversation about the just transition needs to happen. But that process needs to be supported by the BRICS and the global and the G20 in order to make sure that global South perspectives, because both of those groups really do have a lot of representation from the global South, those perspectives sort of permeate through the UNFCCC's actual formal process.
Thank you. Igor, what's your opinion on this?
I think that all these fora are important, but they have different importance. UNFCCC, it is not flexible at all, unfortunately. G20 is very important because it unites countries with 80% of global emissions, and it unites global North and global South, and the dialogue between them is crucially important. But I really hope that BRICS would play a more important and more active role in solving the climate crisis, because the future of climate, it will be solved not in Europe or even not in the United States. Their share in global emissions will reduce, their share in global economy will reduce, but it will be solved in BRICS, in the countries of global South. So whether these huge masses of population will move to the global middle class or even to the high prosperity with new technologies, with new patterns of consumption or not, this is a crucial issue. And BRICS, it is the central platform for developing these new models of economic and social development, and to develop new instruments and new mechanisms. I really hope that BRICS will do it in the near future.
Yeah, and also with the addition of BRICS Plus, which makes it even more energy important grouping. That is what we are looking for. Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much to the two of you. It's been an excellent interaction with Jordan and with Igor. Our key takeaway from this discussion would be something on the lines of that everybody is trying their best. We are just not on the same page. But I hope we move towards better synchronization, making the renewables, the journey towards the renewables more effective, more efficient, and faster as much as possible, because climate change and the impact of not moving towards renewables is a matter that impacts us all. It is not specific to any country. It's everyone that will be suffering. Thank you so much. This is Shomo. We are signing off from the Digital Studio at Cape Town Conversation 2024. Thank you.